welcome back to Galactic Reviews. This week, we're going over the movie Jungle Cruise, which was. I don't know if it's based off of the ride. I
I'm
don't know.
assuming they just wanted to make a story off the ride, and that's what it seems like.
Yeah. So basically, it's Emily Blunt as the main character, and she's off on an adventure in the Amazon to find the tear of the moon. The tear, because it's a flower. Let's be
Yeah,
specific. It is a flower. I don't know how it became a tear, but it is. So yeah, she's on this adventure, runs into the skipper, well, hires a skipper who turns out to be The Rock, and they just go on a adventure trying to find this tear of the moon. So there's your brief synopsis. This movie to me was like a 5 out of 10. Very basic, very average. Had some good parts, but other things held it back. So I'm just going to give it a 5.
it felt like a cop out of many different movies, with especially with the Tear of the Moon. I
Yeah.
didn't realize it until now, but that's kind of a cop out on Tangled. Tangled already did that with the sunflower. It did it in a very different way, but it did it with the sunflower. Felt like a knockoff of Jumanji, especially when seeing the
Honestly, it's
villains,
it
the
yeah, it's a
the
whole bunch
villains
of
in this.
Disney movies put together to make this one movie.
Timing was horrible. Some scenes that they should have done like relatively earlier into the movie, they decided to wait until later to do them.
Yeah.
And there's one scene in particular. Spacing wasn't as great. There was often moments where nothing was going on, and the way that they backed up some scenes where they had one, especially this one scene where Frank tells whatever her freaking name is, Lily, I'm
Emily
assuming.
Blunt. Yes, Lily. I was just going to give their actors' names because I could remember that.
Frank is the only one I know because he was the only interesting character. He told Emily Blunt's character to
Lily.
go in the Amazon and bathe, and then the next scene, he shoots a rat and then throws it into the river and then captures a whole bunch of piranhas.
Yeah.
So
He
was he
just
trying to
wanted.
kill her? You know.
It is possible. Always
So
possible. No,
also
you have. I didn't think of that.
another scene that doesn't make any sense is when he's in that bar or whatever. He went there to specifically go get
An item.
he went to go get an item so that way it would help him further on his adventure.
Yeah.
And then his cat come and then later on when something completely goes awry and that whole thing goes differently
Yeah.
than when it was
Like
going to
he
the
played it off
Panthers.
like he played it
The,
off like he planned this. Why did
yeah.
you do this planned? There was no reason for this.
Also,
Was it
he
just
didn't
to
even
make
know
her
she was.
escape?
Also, also didn't know that she was there in the first place. So it doesn't quite make any sense as to why
I mean,
the
he could have had it so if he got caught, then that showed up just to cause a distraction so he can leave.
possibly. But it looked like
But
he was trying to
still,
defend. But he looked like he was actually defending, and that was planned too. The whole
yeah, so he
defense
can,
and everything and earning trust. So I don't quite understand. Like that
yeah,
scene back to back doesn't quite make any
yeah,
sense.
no, yeah, there's
I like
two,
that.
it was pretty much just to introduce, yeah, this is his pet.
Yeah, pretty much. The Rock doesn't look like a scam artist to me, and that's just me. Looks like a more like a bodybuilder and a superhero than a scam artist. When I think scam
Yeah,
artist, I think more Face Man from 18. That's who I think of as scam artist.
to me, I took everything like it was a joke because that's pretty much how he played off his scams anyways. Like they were just a laughable joke.
Yeah, which kind of this movie was. So,
Yeah,
and
fair
there's
enough.
more problems with it. A lot of things were okay. I'm not going to say a lot of things were good because there wasn't really many good
That's
things.
why I
There
said
were,
it was like a 5 for me. It had some good parts and then it had a lot of things that just held it back. So it was pretty much just an average basic movie. If anything, I would give it like a 4 as my base of the line, but a 5
I
to me
give it,
seems kind of
I'd give it
okay.
3 or 4 as well. I'll give it 3 or 4 because there's just so many. They could have really done a great story.
It had so much potential.
They really
It
did.
looked great in the
Yeah.
trailer. It looked like a nice
Well,
adventure action movie, kind
from the
of like
trailer, me and Andrew talked about this at one point, and we had already said it looks like a knockoff of Jumanji.
let's go ahead and jump into the spoiler territory.
Yes, we are now getting into spoiler territory. So proceed to your own peril. You have been warned.
And if you die, we'll just get a tear of the moon. I don't think that's how that works, they explain Lily, or Emily Blunt, is the child of this famous adventurer that they don't mention at all, besides that he's famous, and that's it. So it's just like you don't even get the name or anything. It's just famous adventurer. She's a woman, so she can't be the face of this, so she has her brother do it. And it's just like they're trying to make a female Indiana Jones slash like
Yeah, it felt like a whole bunch of them trying to make a female adventurer, and it just did not work.
Emily Blunt is a great actress, but this movie was not her best. They chose a lot of good actors. It just wasn't a good movie. Their acting was subpar. It just felt like they put too much time into it being this is a ride. We need to focus on this and not the plot.
I wouldn't even
First
say
off,
that. They went
well,
more
first
into the
off,
they went more into the pandering, I would
fair
say.
enough. I mean, they explained this movie takes place during like World War II,
Well,
or they
no, I would
hint
think
at it.
I would think at World War One because they were still driving really old cars.
Well, yes, but I thought the submarine was a more used in World War II.
I have no idea because they don't explain the timeline.
They don't, except that this Spanish king, because I'm pretty sure he does the German salute. He
I
plays a
don't
lot of
remember.
German songs, I'm pretty sure, throughout the
Okay,
thing. So I'm guessing World War II, they never really hint, like, say
it
yes
could
or
be World
no.
War One, World War Two. All we know is that it's a German war villain,
Yeah, pretty much. It's a
and they,
world war. But even in London, they don't seem like there's that much of a big of a deal. Most of the men would have been at war. They would have
I
had
know, yeah.
wartime, but you saw one group of individuals going, I guess, shipping out to war, but you still have all these men in the city. I understand it's London, but most of them would have been in the
Yeah.
war, especially as their age. So historically, it doesn't really match up with how it should have been represented.
Yeah.
I think,
Speaking of historically not matching up, you talked about the whole pants thing
yes,
and how that kind of
which
like threw you out of the movie.
they do make fun of it in a way, saying, why are you wearing pants? You're a woman, you need to wear a dress. Which I will agree for that timeline, they just don't do that. I mean, you have Tarzan where Jane wears a dress
Hmm.
through everything. She'll rip it to make it like a mini skirt or whatever you want to call it, but
Hmm.
it's still technically a gown. It just doesn't make
And
any
that was
sense.
after World War Two, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So they already make her out as this adventurer, and then they also make her out to be this sort of feminist-ish person anyway, with the whole pants thing, with the whole not wanting to listen to any guys at all. Even when Frank tells her not to do anything, she does it. And most of the
It,
time, Frank does know best, and
I
she
mean,
just goes ahead and does it.
we'll just say it. Frank has the experience. He's been alive for almost 400 years.
Yeah, but she doesn't care because
I
it's a
mean,
man. She doesn't like a man telling her what to do. Also, during that one scene where she yells at him because he was getting eaten by piranhas.
yeah, I'm like, you do realize this is piranha infested. You did like slam his head against the wall,
So you
and
already
so there's gonna
possibly gave
be
him a concussion.
probably, but there's gonna be a cut. And piranhas are like sharks; they're attracted to blood.
Well, he doesn't have any blood. That's the thing.
Fair point. So why were there piranhas?
Okay,
Okay,
then this
if I'm
movie doesn't
if
make
I'm
any sense then.
if I'm remembering piranhas correctly, piranhas usually are docile unless there's blood.
If that's
I
the
don't really
case,
know
then
how.
this movie really doesn't make any sense. That was just a,
They didn't really do their history at all.
at first it was interesting because it was a at first it was a guy who seemed to be well on the rich side and more
Hmm.
with the fancy life, and then they had this
Yeah, just kind of
down
pompous.
down in the mud guy who was willing to get his hands dirty, and then this female who seemed to like both sides of it. So I mean, it could have been an interesting dynamic, but instead
I
they
mean,
try to play the whole.
they pretty much did the same thing with they pulled Tarzan pretty much.
Mhm.
Jane as the person who likes both sides of it. She enjoys the city, she enjoys the jungle. You have her father who's her father's not really a money person, but he's like Jane, he enjoys both sides. So it's pretty much the Tarzan feel between Frank and Lily. and then her brother's kind of just a third wheel.
I like how they try not to perpetuate stereotypes, and then all they do is perpetuate stereotypes. Like they've done it
Yeah.
with Snake Eyes in Hollywood. I'm just saying in Hollywood general.
Yes.
They did it with Snake Eyes. They did it now with McGregor by making him gay, and he was good until they decided, yeah, let's just make him gay. Because to be honest, I like how that really played into the story. Just like
I mean,
it
it
had
wouldn't.
nothing to do with the story.
No. And honestly, you wouldn't have noticed it until they said something. Yes, he acted different, but during that time period, in a way, that's how they acted in the first
Yeah,
place.
they were all a lot of the people
Pompous,
in the upper class were already uppity and
uppity.
didn't really
Yeah.
think much of the lower people. I don't get this at all.
And then they had to make that. I saw it when Frank got stabbed and Lily was
Hmm.
trying to pull out the sword. They had to make sexual jokes about it
Hmm. Yeah,
with McGregor. And I'm like,
yeah,
that is just 100% unnecessary. To me,
yeah,
I was just kind of disgusted by that point, by that one scene. I'm
yeah.
like, this is cool. And then they did that. And I'm like, nope, never mind.
So let's see. They did all that. She writes a paper about something that seems very obscure, very out there, and then gets mad when people don't believe her because she's a woman, when in all actuality, it's a myth. She was told this as a fairy tale. Most people
I'm
at this
sure,
time period would have thought of this as a myth. And then
yeah.
she expects when it's told by a man, by her brother, she expects it to then be taken seriously when they don't take it seriously then either. So,
Yeah, honestly, I'm
and then
with
she
the
pisses in their faces
society.
when she finds out that it
Well,
actually is true.
and they're like, yeah, this association recognizes you, so you're allowed in our association group. And he's like, yeah, I'm sorry, she's been accepted as a professor. My history might be wrong. It's been a long time since I've done any research. I know I've done a lot of reports on World
Yeah.
War One and Two.
Well, the thing is, they try to make it historic-ish, but then they like
Completely disgrace it.
well, yeah, they're
Yeah,
trying to modernize it with our present problems.
the whole thing is they had their own problems. That's why it escalated to a world war.
Yeah.
So don't modernize it and change the reason the war was being fought, which they didn't do. But they changed how people would have thought, their
Mhm.
thought processes back then.
They made
I'm
it
like,
as the male misogynist patriarchy.
which honestly, in an association like that, yes, it would have been like that. They are very untrusting. They only want very prestigious people, but you
Hmm.
have to have hard evidence to be able to get into there. It's the same thing with Indiana Jones. The
Yeah.
only reason he was a part of any association was because he brought back these artifacts
And also,
that were
he
marked
had
as
hard
myths.
evidence.
Exactly. So they just destroyed like the whole historical structure of it
Mhm.
to make it modern, which was really the biggest problem with me. Second off, a jaguar would not be like that. I wouldn't think. Yes, you can train them, but they still have predator instincts. And you
True.
can't really train a cat.
It acted more
Yes,
like a dog, I
yes,
will say.
giant cats like tigers, lions, and everything like that can be trained, but
Mhm.
they are still extremely headstrong and they want to do what they want, unlike dogs.
Well, that's not really one of the things that bothered me. That was actually
I
one of
mean,
the more
no,
interesting parts of the movie.
it was, but I'm still like, come on,
I
little
mean, they didn't get
realism.
anything else accurate. What makes you think they're gonna get this accurate?
I
Just
mean, fair enough.
and
I should have
apparently,
expected it when
yeah,
the cat bit Frank and there was still no blood. No puncture wounds or any. They didn't even
yeah,
ask him, are you okay? We just watched you get bit by this jaguar. Oh
yeah.
no, I'm fine.
Well,
That
one, it
way.
wasn't well planned and thought out, but also it was basically propaganda. Another thing was Emily Blunt. I'm pretty sure you could take her out because that fight scene was horrendous. Like at first, when like she
Oh,
was like going up and actually had a handkerchief and then got the guy, I thought that was realistic. And then when she starts full out punching the guys and they actually go out, that's when I was like, okay, this is ridiculous.
I mean,
Like I
first off,
understand with
first
superhero
off,
movies, you got the
yeah,
but
yeah, but I understand, yes, if you have good form and everything.
we see no training of her actually getting any of this stuff. We just see a person who I assume is like 5'6" punching people that are 6 foot and built
Yeah,
a little bit smaller than The Rock, but not by
and
much.
I'm gonna be perfectly honest. Even if they're high aristocrat, robots, they still are burly men.
Mhm.
They will take a hit, most of the time shrug it off.
Yes.
Unless it's like her brother in the way he acts, like kind of less into that stuff and more just into the money.
They deliberately do not say that he's into guys, but they make that association right off the bat. And they
Yeah,
deliberately do not say it outright because they want it to do well in China.
a fair point.
And I like how also she has no regard for anything Frank says because he says, "Do not go into my own quarters."
Yes, which
And
is,
that's one of the first thing that she does.
it's like
And
the
then she gets
captain's
mad that
quarters.
he's
You don't
lying to
go in
her.
the captain's quarters.
It's not your stuff. Don't go in there.
First off, you hired him to do a job. Yes, he didn't really want to do the job, but still, you respect someone's privacy.
Also, this is technically his home, and that's
Fair.
technically his room.
It doesn't matter if he's hiding something.
He's got a
I
right to
mean,
hide stuff. With him being 400 years old, he can't trust everybody. I was just gonna say they gender swap Trader Sam, some
the
guy at the in the Jungle Cruise ride. Yeah, I've never been on the ride either. At first, when I saw that Trader Sam, I was like, I feel like they did something, and I was right. And I don't like being right, especially when this is concerned. But they deliberately did that so that way she's also the chief.
I was about to say Trader Sam is the chief.
Yeah, and they also had that whole line at the end where he's like, also there was this chief, this group of natives that had a chief woman, and then you had all the men grown.
Even
At
in
that point, I was
the
pissed
thing
off
is,
with the movie.
even in tribes, native tribes in Africa and everything, you don't really have females
It
because
was
yes,
mostly
they're
dudes.
still looked down upon
It
because
was
it's
mostly dudes.
primitive.
I mean, there were some cases where like females were in charge, like Cleopatra. Men were mostly the people in charge. That's just straight up fact of life, and that's the way it was back then. And in native culture, that's the way it would have been because they were still pretty primitive. This could have been a very fun movie. Instead, they
It could have.
decided to turn it into a propaganda movie. And the story was interesting when the story was told, but the
Yes,
story took a backseat to all the propaganda.
it really did. It honestly, you didn't really get this back to the story. You got the story in the first like 10 minutes, and then you went on a journey of propaganda until like the last 30 minutes, and then it was back to the story.
And I also like how they try to make her selfless or whatever, but then they leave all of Frank's counterparts that were honestly still stone and could have gone back to being human. They decided to just leave him there.
I understand why they were still fighting, but at this point, were they fighting to be free? Because honestly, they
Yeah,
can't save his daughter anymore. They just wanted freedom from the curse.
I mean, they kind of wanted to kill him because he kind of betrayed them. In all, in
Yeah,
all fairness, in their eyes. But at this point, they're
but
kind of
at that
just
point,
tired and they
I
want to
mean,
just be free.
you can free them and then kill them, honestly, and that they can live a peaceful life in death. But
Yeah, well,
I think they would be better off that way because apparently they are awake and conscious during the
yeah. That's
time
why
they're
they
in
said it's a
stone
fate worse than death, and
or
he
the
decided
future.
to leave him there. I mean, I get you got bad blood, but you also had like
Yeah,
three hundred years to
wait till the
just
next moon, have the moon come up, take some, wait for the moon to set, give it to them, and then kill them.
yeah.
If you want to put them out of their misery, that would be the best bet.
Well, also they also said they were going to get a choice. I'm pretty sure at least the guy who was the dad would have wanted to at least die because what more is there to live for? His daughter, who he went to go get the thing for, is dead, and there's
Exactly.
nothing he can do about it.
Now, I will admit, some of their abilities and powers that they have were pretty cool. Like
Yeah,
the one that could control like
yeah. The
the
one that
vines
could
and
control
everything.
the bees one was new. The
That was
snake one
funny.
was a ripoff of Jumanji. The tree
Yeah.
one was a ripoff of Groot.
Well,
I'm trying
yes,
to
but
think.
it's still cool.
I mean, it's still cool. Don't get me wrong. That was about
The
the coolest thing in the movie. But
now
that's
the B
also where all
one
the CGI went
the
to.
B one yeah, the B one I enjoyed, especially every time you saw him he was like licking his hand.
If they're freaking immortal, why are they still fighting? They could just ignore the other. They could just ignore the other guy
Yeah, like I understand you're still looking for this, but honestly, you can ignore him instead of
and just
killing
go
him
looking
over and
for it.
over and over again.
And if you're immortal, just go down to the bottom of the river, go pull down on the thing.
I
It's
like how they're like Frank still needs air to breathe, so he has to go to the surface every time to
yeah.
get more air.
but he doesn't have blood. Pardon me for
And your
questioning it, but that kind of
and
like
your
takes away the whole thing about breathing.
so your heart isn't beating? It's not what's keeping you alive? So
They don't really explain everything
why do
or
your
anything.
lungs still need air? They
Eh,
could have given more of a backstory to Lily and her brother as
yeah.
to who her father was, why she has this much knowledge and experience,
And
it,
especially why she wants so desperately to find this thing. Because I mean,
and
it's
how is her father so famous and important?
well, yeah. Also that, and apparently, I would think her father would have been laughed at this thing if taken seriously
I'm
because
pretty
they
sure they
seem
did
not to care.
mention it.
All in all, they sold it as a film for one of their rides. Instead, they decided to make it a propaganda film about all this stuff they uphold. Emily Blunt was the most annoying protagonist in this movie
She is
I've
in
ever seen.
so many better films. This was not a good one for
I'm not
her.
gonna say it's her fault because she seemed like a decent actress, whatever. But
Yes.
this character was so poorly written,
Yes.
it's atrocious.
Honestly, the only character with a backbone is Frank.
Yeah, he's
Then
the only one with plot and
Lily.
backstory at all. Period.
I mean, McGregor gets more of a backstory and
Yeah,
a plot than
and more
Lily.
development than
Yes,
Lily. Lily really doesn't get anything develop. Doesn't
she
really get
just.
any development.
I mean, she was like Snake Eyes, just stagnant.
McGregor was good until they decided to write him as a gay, and then it was kind of like, okay, we're perpetuating stereotypes again.
Before that, the only stereotype was that she was wearing pants, pretty much. And I was like, okay, if they're going to do that, whatever, they can do that. And then it made it to McGregor being gay, and then they kept on overlapping more and more stereotypes.
At first, I didn't really think about anything about the whole pants thing because I didn't really care. But then
Yeah,
I was like, it's like World War I era to World War II era. They don't really say. I think they don't really say, so that way they can just be like, oh, this is just generic. We can get away with whatever here and there. We're gonna just fiddle the cards where they may
I
because
mean,
there was a whole bunch of things that didn't quite make much
you could
sense.
look at the guns. I'm pretty sure the guns in the story as well was World War II.
But they
Everything
never
to me
explicitly
about it
said it.
screams World War II, but I
Yeah,
could still be
true.
wrong.
But also, they don't really say
Yeah.
World War II. There's also no swastikas at all throughout the thing, which prohibits me from thinking it's World War II because I would think they'd at least have either a picture of Adolf or a swastika. They had neither.
Well, the thing is, apparently those two symbols have been banned and marked as bad. I can't remember what's the proper name. Um,
If you're gonna say bad
but
or evil, it's because he's the freaking bad guy.
yeah,
This might be
but the thing
shocking to
is,
people.
to my knowledge, it's not promoted. Well, of
Yeah,
course it's not promoted, but they don't want
no,
to show that symbol.
yeah, because it might
And
hurt
I'm like,
somebody's feels.
yeah, I get it, but that's history. And if you want to make a movie that's historically accurate to some degree, you kind of need that.
Especially if you're making a very stereotypical German villain.
I
Back
mean,
into
yes,
stereotypes again.
yes, honestly, having the music that he would sing all the time, the German music, they would do that a lot. Sing like the German national anthem and stuff like that.
Yep. But I would
But
also think they do that during World War I too. So they really don't. My
yeah,
thing is they really don't give a time frame. They play off that and promote all this kind of propaganda crap that they keep on going on throughout it.
the thing is, if any character found out that McGregor was gay and the Germans had a gun and they figured out he is gay, they would have just killed him and shot him on sight.
Well, I was thinking he was going to do that
100%.
anyway.
When
He
they
was going to do
kidnapped
that anyway.
him,
So
got the information they needed, and then they figured out he was gay, they're like, "Oh,
I think that
you're disgusting."
I thought
Just
they
kill
would have,
him.
I thought they were
Um,
going to kill him anyway because they're the freaking bad guys. They don't care if he
Fair
lives.
point. The same,
He's not
honestly, the same
important.
with
The only thing he
Lily.
was important was for information, and then when he gave the information, you just kill him. That's the bad guy motive.
Fair point. Honestly, the same thing with Lily. They would have saw her as a radical.
Doesn't mean it.
As soon as the tree was activated, they would have killed her. First off, to give them a flower, no, they would have just killed both of them off and said the flowers are mine. That's
Yeah,
how they would have been during World War I and II. They need these things. They would have used you for your purpose, tricked you, deceived you, and then killed you as soon as it was done. They give you false hope and then they kill you.
yeah,
That's how it works. Yes, I understand that the main character
yeah.
and they have plot armor, but I mean, just saying. It just was stagnant. It was very basic, very bland, very
Stagnant
boring.
storyline, very bland
Um,
propaganda throughout most of
yeah,
the film.
that's why I'm like it's a 5 for the basic story and everything, but it gets brought down to 4 for me because of all the propaganda added to it. If the story was on track and they actually emphasized the story, it would have been better if they took out all the propaganda or minimalize or just left it to that she was wearing pants and that she was a woman that was getting recognition. That would
Yeah.
have been fine by me.
My problem is they
But
kept on trying to make this.
emphasizing on everything else
Yeah.
is an overkill.
Well, my problem is they try to make this somewhat historic, and then they try to take out all the history. It's like,
Yeah,
why make it historic? It's just
yeah. Just
so.
make
I
a
mean,
modern jungle
and they
cruise.
really could have. They really could have just made modern Jungle Cruise,
100%.
and it would have been fine. And Frank probably would have still been in the dark. People in England do pants now. Like he probably would have been in the dark. He's only heard these people, and they're kind of backwater, very poor people. The only one that was rich was the guy who had all the boats. But it wouldn't get their points across and their propaganda across as
Hmm.
much if they did it in modern age. They had to pull it back historically. The only problem was historically they would have seen they would have been
Just
seen as
it.
more of a nuisance or so out of their mind that even the people who probably would have been pushing for some
Which
female
honestly,
empowerment and stuff would have
historically
been
speaking,
would have been appalled by
they
them.
did they did get the reaction the family would have given McGregor
Yeah.
accurately. He would have just been disowned and put on the streets. He wouldn't have any money. So all the money he does have is Lily's. So, and if that's the case, they would have just pulled all of their support from her, disowned her, and she would have been left with no money. I mean, first off, she's a woman, she wouldn't have the money anyways. It would be the betrothal
Well
money.
maybe if she was like the sole heir after that.
No, because I'm pretty sure then it would be like the betrothal money for the person you marry. You don't officially receive that money until you're wed. I think that's how that worked back then.
I don't know. I just know a lot of inaccuracies in here. But after hearing more of your inaccuracies, it's just like, okay, then what was the freaking point of making it in this time period other than to promote your propaganda? I'm gonna take mine down to the 3, just because it
Yeah, I moved mine
is
down to like a 4,
the more you
4.5.
think about it, the more
The
aggravated you
story's
get.
the story's average, but it just brings down the whole thing when they just force propaganda
Yeah,
over and over and over
yeah,
again.
it's propaganda on top of propaganda. The story takes a backseat, which a story should not do.
To be
They
honest, most people, when they go to the ride, they'll think of this movie, and I feel like
Now
a
I don't
lot
want to
of
go to the ride.
people won't go on the ride anymore, or people that enjoyed the ride no longer enjoy the ride.
It's bad all the way around, no matter how you look at it. If you agree with the propaganda, it's got historical inaccuracies. If you ignore both, then the storytelling
You're
takes a back
just
seat to the whole thing, and the
you're just
characters get
left with
no development. And if you ignore everything and then say it's a good movie, you're just being blind at this point.
yeah,
Because
100%. At this point, I mean, you're not even. I don't even see where you can. The only thing good about this movie was the CGI.
poorly done, very rushed in some areas, very
Hmm.
well prolonged in others, where it didn't need to happen. Yeah, all in all, a bad movie.
So, not recommended.
No, most definitely not.
With that being said, tune in next week when we are watching
The movie's free,
Free.
guy. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time on Galactic Reviews.
Thank you, mysterious lady.